Thanks for that. Good evening, everybody. My name's Laura Ramos, and it is a pleasure to introduce my panel, but I wanted to start with a quick acknowledgement of country before we get started. And before we do that, um, I also wanted to do a quick spot of housekeeping. So we've got a pretty full house tonight. Kicking off, I hope you've all had a chance to grab a bite to eat, have a chat with the demos that were here. You can see where the exits are, and the toilets are just around the corner here. Also wanted to check that your phones are silented, but that they are nearby, because we're going to be doing a few questions via Slido in a little bit. So Yutong, just so that people have a chance to see the Slido, we'll just switch over so you can see the QR code. So this will come on in a few minutes, and we'll get started with the questions. And in the meantime, if you've got any questions for the panel, feel free to drop them in on the Slido as well. So we'll toggle over and introduce our panel. And I forgot to do the acknowledgement. So perfect timing. So I do want to acknowledge that we are meeting on Gadigal land. So we're on the lands of the Gadigal of the Eora Nation. And Zach is joining us from the lands of the Kaurna people in South Australia. So I do want to take a moment to pay respects to elders past and present, and really thank them for their custodianship of the lands where we're all gathering today. Time for some introductions. So I'm Laura Ramos, founder of Helpful Engines, and today we're here to bring together founders, makers, researchers, and sector leaders, people with lived experience, to talk about innovation for dementia care and cognitive support, which is something that is very dear and near to my heart and really to everyone here in this room. So it is my pleasure to introduce. I'll go from left to right. So Rick Bray, thank you for joining us. Richard Bray is the founder of HeartStreet, and it's an innovative business delivering an app to help family and friends connect with loved ones living with Alzheimer's and dementia. And he's building that based on 2 decades of experience in software development. So we're very fortunate to have Rick here today. Denise Duclos is here with Peter Duclos. So I'll introduce Peter first, and then you, Denise. So Peter is joining us as a dementia advocate today. Peter served in the police force for 28 years, rising in the ranks to lead complex criminal investigations. And since leaving the force, he's remained active as a volunteer for Lifeline and as a dementia advocate through Dementia Australia, and in his spare time playing competitive golf at Longreef Golf Club. Denise Duclos is joining us as a care and spouse of Peter, but has also been very active. I just learned earlier that she's been leading a charity for the last several years, in addition to having a busy life and really providing a lot of support. So a really unique view, and I'm really grateful, Denise, that you could be here with us today. It is a joy for me to introduce Associate Professor Celia Harris from the MARCS Institute for Brain Behaviour and Development at Western Sydney University. Celia is a leading cognitive scientist who studies human memory and has a deep expertise in autobiographical memory, and that's our memory for life events, and how we can support that memory through tools, technologies, and social interactions to nurture connection and well-being for older people. During my PhD, it was also my joy to read many of Celia's papers, so I was really stoked when she agreed to join us today. Tom Morris. Tom is the Director, Dementia Research Program and Analytics at HammondCare, and he has contributed to innovation at HammondCare for over 7 years already. He holds a PhD in neuropsychology from Macquarie University, and that was conducting research on identifying individuals at risk for Alzheimer's disease. See, I did actually, I got past almost the abstract, but it was actually a real coup that we were able to get somebody with Tom's expertise today at our panel. And lastly, but certainly not leastly here in the room today. And then I'll go over to Zach. We've got George Margelis, who is Chief Technology Advisor at Aging Australia. George started his career as a resident doctor at RPA, but quickly progressed to roles in industry at major corporates, including Intel and General Electric. He's got a very strong interest and is an advocate for improving quality and delivery of healthcare through innovation enabled by information technology. So very fortunate to have this level of experience here in the room. I also want to toggle over to the screen and introduce Zach Bailey, who is joining us from South Australia. Again, a coup that he was able to join us today. Zach is the founder of CareWindow. In addition to having an amazing business that he's been building and expanding, hopefully we'll hear a little bit during the panel, he was recently acknowledged as one of the top young entrepreneurs in the state of South Australia. So big gong, and you can actually check it out on the socials. So Zach, thank you very much for joining us. So it did take a minute to go through all of those intros, but I just wanted to make sure that you got just the flavor of the depth of experience that we've got in the panel. So let's find out what's going to happen next in tech for dementia care. So as we start the conversation, I wanted to kick off with one question that you can just bounce and each one of you share. I'd like to ask our panel, what's one thing that you'd like the audience here to know as we're starting this conversation? And how does that actually matter in the daily lives of people affected by dementia? So who would like to go first?
Look, I might kick in. I think the key thing to understand is that, when we talk about dementia, it's a multifaceted disease, and it's sort of compounded by the other vagaries of aging, which include frailty, increase in risk of falls, and it varies. And so there is no, you've seen one patient with dementia, you've seen one patient with dementia. It has a lot of variation around it. The key is that it's, even though technically it's a lifelong disease, it is manageable for most of the stage. So understanding how we can improve the quality of life by putting in things that enable them to manage the cognitive decline as it progresses, and the forgetting where things are, but also what we can do to improve their quality of life by providing other services to supplement it. So I think that's one of the key things we need to keep in mind. It's not a be-all and end-all thing. It really is a lifelong journey.
Thank you.
I echo those sentiments absolutely, entirely. I'll take a different lens, and that's on innovation. Innovation is necessary. It's used a bit too often. I think that's become a buzzword, but it doesn't mean that it has incredible intent. And I would just hope that everyone in the room reflects that innovation is not technology. Innovation can apply to models of care, different methods of approaching people. And, honestly, in terms of care and improving quality of life, some of the most innovative things people can do is just implement best practice, which has been known for decades. All that to say, the future of sustainable care for people as we age and for people living with a cognitive impairment has to include technological solutions.
Thanks. Yes, it's kind of hard to have a sensible follow-up to that, but I guess I would say that technology has to sit within people's lives. So people come to aging, they come to dementia with a rich lived experience and, a full life like everybody. And so people have different needs, they have different ways their lives are set up. And so technology is only one piece of how somebody might be cognitively supported in their day-to-day life. And if you want to know how your technology is going to be used and how it's going to be helpful, you really need to sit and observe people using it in their day-to-day life and the way that they interact with it in the context of all the other stuff that they're doing and all the other kinds of supports and tools that they have in their environment.
I think I only need one. Thanks very much for being here tonight. Yes, I am living with dementia, and it's not something I expected at my life and my career, but that's what it is. And what I'm really want to get across is the fact that this, yes, it's a serious, very life-ending disease, but there's a lot of living to be done as well. And I am very, very strong in regard to that. I'm trying to do what I can do for the best to my capability. I know it's going to diminish over time, but in between now and then, there's a lot of living to be done. I'm not going to be afraid of it. It's something that is going to define me at some stage, but I'm going to give it a hell of a shot and maybe be the one that breaks it. So that's me.
I would just like to say that it's very much a team effort, and Peter shouldn't have to struggle on his own. I'm very involved. Our daughters are, their partners. It's very much a team effort to try to make our lives as fulfilling as possible. And I think that we're doing a pretty good job of that at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for organising this event. And I just probably to add to what everyone's mentioned there is probably that what we experience is that everyone's very unique in their requirements and needs and wants, and that with that uniqueness, people are unique too. And so with those two facets kind of combining, there's a lot of different requirements when you're trying to design technology and design innovations for people in this space. And so that's just probably just start adding some complexities into the difficulties in designing and creating systems that help people in this space. Should we move to Zach?
Yes, please.
Sure. So I'll grab the virtual microphone. There we go. So I'll probably just add to that, to what all my peers have said. Some of the learnings we had around dementia with family experience with Dad. And one of the things that really stuck out to me was the good days and the bad days. And any approaches that are taken to help manage need to be able to adapt. It's not just about supporting the bad days, but it's about not getting in the way of the good days. One of my favorite advocates on this talks about post-it notes they had around their house. They don't need their post-it notes on their good days to prompt their memory, and seeing them around the house makes them feel safer about when their bad days might come up. So I think as a technology designer, we often sometimes overlook that technology and solutions can often be simple, and simple can be impactful. So we're designing to manage a complex case, and sometimes a simple solution can be very strong. So yeah, it's probably my thoughts that add to that.
Thanks for that, Zach, and to all of the panel members. So we're kind of starting to hit a lot of the themes that I was quite curious about. And what I wanted to do is to turn it over to the audience and hear from you. So I just wanted to take a moment to just check, what do you think? So we'll just switch over to the Slido. And apologies to Zach, you won't be able to see the question, but you can follow on the QR code as well. Because technology doesn't exist in a vacuum. I wanted to ask, when we design technology for dementia care and cognitive support, who should we be designing for? And I think we've heard a few things from the panel, but what do you think?
Oh, I'll jump in on the answer to that if we like.
Keep going, Zach. Go for it.
So when I'm sort of thinking about designing technical solutions, there's sort of three parties that I really think about quite closely. One is, of course, the individual themselves, the end user, and bringing them in and involving them as much as possible, because it's really for them that it's created. And then I think the two most important stakeholders around them are their families, those that are providing that care and support every day, all that informal stuff that really goes a long way. Finding out what can make their days easier can often mean they can be doing their job of imparting more joy more often. And then, of course, the carers. In our design journey, we designed both for residential aged care and for community care workers. And we wouldn't have seen our solution highly adopted had we not considered the carers as a key stakeholder and user group. We have a camera on our device. Our device goes into aged care. So we have to think very carefully about the privacy implications and things like that of any technology that we design, even though the benefits of the camera are fantastic for the individual living with dementia to communicate with their family. We had to be very considerate of the combined workplace and home environment for some of the environments we're designing for. So I think those three groups are particularly important with our design considerations.
We'll do a quick toggle back and hear what the group has been thinking. And while we're doing that, I was wondering if anybody else had any comments about, who should we be designing for?
I think any touch point that involves care should be designed for. And you don't want to miss that in terms of improving outcomes, in terms of innovation and technology. If it is about education, education is woeful. If it is about stigma, stigma is horrible as a part of a funding problem. If it is about systems, interoperability of data and data systems, interactions with health networks, if it is about culture within organizations, I think all of those benefit from innovation and technology, and it's very easy to remember. And obviously the person should be at the center of everything and should be considered from day one. The person, their family, formal carers and systems and supports and community and their lived environment. But there are many other touch points where change can occur.
Yeah, and I think the other point is to remember that the end user is lots of different people as well. So, people with dementia could be people living alone who don't have families, and that's an entirely different use case from people who have a close network of informal carers. So thinking about what are the different priorities that people might have for supporting their own care, that's going to look really different for different people. People with dementia might be somebody in their 60s, there might be somebody in their 90s, and those look really different. Aged care looks different from care at home. So it's understanding that people with dementia, older people, are not a homogenous group, and they're people who come with really different needs, really different priorities for what they want to be supported with. And your product, your design might be only useful for a segment of that group, and that's okay. So yeah, thinking about who it's useful for and what it's designed to do.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, one of the key things is separate the solution from the interface. So the solution itself has to have multifunctionality, so it suits the various parts of the who's involved in delivering care or in receiving care. But the interface needs to be specific to the person who's using that particular part of it. So for a consumer perspective, or someone with a cognitive decline, you need a simple interface. But for a clinician, you need a detailed interface with lots of data. The key being, of course, that the data needs to be shared across that whole sector. So what you don't want is a whole bunch of separate siloed solutions that don't talk to each other. You want a solution that's sort of centralized with various interfaces depending on who's going to be accessing it at any particular time.
I'm just going to jump in on that point. The best way we should have probably asked this question was, when we design technology for dementia care and cognitive support, who should we be designing with? That is extremely important for successful innovations.
So I think there should be introduction to, assistive devices and user-friendly technology as early as possible, because once a person starts to lose touch with technology, then that's it. Then it's going to be harder for them to learn something new. So I think the earlier that you introduce something, the better, because then they're likely to keep using technology for longer.
Yeah, and we've found with the app that we've made that it's important to have that ability to switch on and off features, to dial up and down features, and to change settings as required. And not necessarily the person using the app itself. It could be someone supporting them remotely from their phone. And we found that to be really helpful in those situations to be able to do that.
And I'll just jump in and say a final thing as it comes to mind, is when you think about designing for people with a cognitive impairment or living with dementia, recognize that a lot of the time good design for them is good design for everybody. 100%. And we've all experienced that. I think if you go to a hotel room or a hotel and it's extremely dark and you can't find your way to the lift, or you go to the bathroom and there's like 4 different sensors and it's impossible to use, or you get a HelloFresh box and the font is like size 6 and you can't read it.
100%. So we've kind of greased the wheels to that question of what's next. And then first thinking about the challenges and also the opportunities, because I think there are many reasons to feel hopeful, and hopefully we'll get to that. But from the perspectives of our different members of the panel, did you want to like zoom in on some unmet needs? So what are the unmet needs for people living with dementia and for the people within their circle as well, the care partners? And if you want to be bold, what technologies should we be deploying in response?
Do you want me to jump in? So I guess from an unmet needs perspective, for a loved one maybe living with dementia, there's a myriad of unmet needs, I think, and some that we've witnessed around maybe sometimes isolation, again, depending on their circumstances, if they're living at home on their own. And there's maybe sometimes there's sort of agitation as well can come up. For my mum, she was diagnosed with mixed Alzheimer's and vascular dementia when I was 28 years old, and she was very lonely, had a lot of isolation and a lot of difficulties in that space. So I think from a provider's perspective, the unmet needs maybe can be about what's happening between visits, like between maybe home visits if the person's having home carers come in, and also or even in a residential space, it's you can't always be there, and I think there's a big unmet need of what's happening for that person when people aren't there, and from a carer's perspective, I think there's a lot of unmet needs around information overload. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of we're here a part of a number of carer groups, and it's really hard to navigate the space. It's very complex. There's a lot of things you have to deal with, and there's a lot of emotions that come with it. So yeah, it's a real challenge.
I mean, wearing my doctor's hat, you tend to focus on the safety aspect. You're trying to think, okay, how do I keep this person safe during a situation? But what you experience when you work with people with a cognitive decline is that you realize that you also need to take into account the dignity of risk, their ability to do things that they would normally do. They may do them slower, they may do them differently, but they still have things they do in their life. And as the safety model tends to cotton ball them, which actually leads to frustration and then they're actually deteriorating. So actually having things that enable them to do things with a degree of safety. I mean, obviously, you don't want to put them into unsafe situations, but facilitate activities, facilitate social interaction, facilitate being able to go down the road and have a cup of coffee because you know where they are, so that if they do get there and they don't know how to get home, there's a way to manage those sort of things. Facilitate their interactions, their daily interactions. I think it's really important to maintain some degree of normal life's models of care, but also they said, it's really easy when some of the projects we were involved in very early on was like, cocoon them, lock them in the house, don't let them out, geo-fence the area, make everything safe. That's great from a safety perspective. From a quality of life perspective, it's really not great.
It's a very good point, actually. I'd probably add that sorry, I jumped in. I'd probably add that my experience with that is really mirrored. The approaches at the moment are very clinical. They're very like symptom and safety management, and that's kind of the information that families get as well. Is this is how to know what's happening, but you don't get much information about how to enrich and continue to enrich somebody's life. With Dad, his journey was very sudden. He went from very little symptoms to a lot of symptoms, very, very severe sequencing and impulse control difficulty. And we kind of knew what that meant from helping him with his day-to-day activities perspective, but from reducing isolation, helping him get out of the house, helping him interact with others, and helping him perform fulfilling activities, we're really on our own to work that out. I was fortunate to get a lot of time with him. So I realized that with sequencing difficulty that we could put Lego models together. I would have to show him the order in which to do them, but he could still do them, and he could look at his shelf and see all the things that he created. And Dad was in went to a fairly severe stage dementia very quickly. But I think that there's no real information out there that says this is how to structure, modify, or adapt activities, approaches, social settings to really suit somebody to be able to continue to enrich their lives. But when you get that right, that's the difference between someone surviving and thriving. Like the differences we would see in Dad between the days where he was just being cared for and the days where he was having an enriched day and enjoying his activities were night and day. And in fact, he would the following days not just be happier, but it would lead to more of the good days cognitively as well. So I think that's sort of a gap we see beyond solving the problem of isolation. It's making sure that the moments together are kept meaningful and that families and carers around them are going to adapt their approaches to maintain that meaning.
100%. I'm just going to toggle over to the Slido because I think this is kind of leading to another question that I wanted to ask of the audience. And this is that all right? Yeah. Okay. So we'll just toggle over to the next and go to the next question. Awesome. So we really did want to hear from you. What areas of dementia care? You've heard about a huge amount of diversity of use cases, diversity of users. But what areas of dementia care do you think are the most neglected from a tech and innovation point of view? And some of these questions are actually coming from the audience, by the way. They're part of the registration, including this one. So while we get some of the responses coming through on the screen, we'll leave that up for a minute. Zach, chime in. You're off the screen, but we can definitely have you back for a minute. I'll kind of phrase it differently for our panel and continue the conversation while we get some of these responses from the audience. So it's widely agreed, and this is actually the way that one of our audience members phrased it. It's widely agreed that the aged care industry needs digital innovation urgently. But providers, and there are some providers in the room, are typically unsupportive or lack capacity to explore the possibilities, all of them except HammondCare. So how can innovators and advocates get the attention of providers to try and accelerate that pace of innovation?
I'll be a provider voice, but also I reflect that early detection is on the screen, and or it was at one point. Oh, there it is. That's something that has to be a focus in most healthcare settings. The focus is on prevention. It is the case now in terms of pursuing a cure for Alzheimer's disease. In terms of caring for individuals living with a cognitive impairment or otherwise, it's not rocket science, and it's very reactive. And it's not that they're neglected. It's very difficult to do, and they're very data oriented, but anything that can assess falls risk, antecedent identification of behavior and all those types of features, inappropriate hospitalization, etc., are fundamental to optimizing care. In terms of how to work with providers in terms of innovative solutions, there's a number. I will tick some off. Don't be a solution looking for a problem. If you have read something about LLMs and you think that, dementia is a big market, which it is, and some people think, and you go to a provider with that solution, they're not going to be interested. The other is really consider the feasibility of the ability to implement that intervention and its interaction with their platforms, such as API and time constraints. It should always be saving time and efficiencies, because fundamentally, a lot of care is not rocket science. People need to be with people. If you're at like a proof of concept stage, think about scalability and sustainability as well, because a lot of solutions are out there that have very limited avenues or very limited thought that has gone into them about how they will scale and be sustainable.
Absolutely. Go ahead, sir. I'll jump in. I was going to say, from the innovator side, some things we did that got the attention of aged care organisations like HammondCare, who we're very grateful for entertaining us a few times, is most of them have innovation teams. Especially the larger organisations, they have people wearing specific hats. Of course, HammondCare Innovations is one great example of that, and many of the other both residential and community care providers all have people with designated roles to hunt out innovative tech. They recognise the importance of that. They also recognise that it can be hard to take their operational clinical teams aside from their day-to-day roles to look at it. So they put a circle around some people specifically and say, please, you hunt innovative tech and promote it among our teams. And reaching them, wasn't overly challenging. It took us a few months to crack the code, but essentially it came down to attend the industry events, for example, those run by Aging Australia, attend the other sort of manufacturer type events like ATSA, Assistive Technology Suppliers Australia. Take the time, don't expect it to happen overnight, but get to know the community, and you'll end up identifying the innovation team members that are very supportive. And there's a lot more of them out there. Some people look at it because they're sending cold emails, I'm not getting through. Well, if you get the FaceTime with somebody, suddenly it becomes the door gets opened a lot wider, and it's been quite good to us.
Yeah, that makes a very good point. I mean, being where the providers are and having those conversations is really important. The biggest challenge most providers face is workforce. They just don't have enough people to provide the care they want to provide. And while you hear complaints about people waiting, because it literally comes down to that we just don't have the physical workforce. So solutions that facilitate that physical workforce, that make that workforce, we talk about greater productivity, but actually make their job easier and more enjoyable for them, that will help bring people into the sector. Solutions that avoid a lot of the administrative tasks. So whilst we like to focus very much on the clinical side of things or the point of care things, the reality is half their time is spent doing admin. So if you can speed up some of that admin stuff, get that out of the way, make them they'd be able to, if they've got 60 minutes with a client, they can spend 55 of those minutes doing care for the client rather than 25 of it doing paperwork. Those sort of things really get attention. The other thing, of course, is that aged care providers have limited funds. So you need to think about how does it fit into their funding model? Do you provide us? If you remove the need for delivery of a service, they get paid for that service. So therefore, you're actually decreasing their revenue stream. So you need to think about things that either enhance their revenue stream or make their revenue stream stretch out longer. So these are sort of some of the core business things that need to take into account.
I think one other thing with if you want to work in residential aged care is to really understand the space. So spend some time there, hang out there, see what it's like, just immerse in the context, because you might think you have a great idea that just isn't practical. And there's some really great research on this showing the unintended consequences of introducing what might be really cool cutting edge technology into aged care settings. So for instance, a robot that can lead dance groups that ends up taking 4 staff members to manage the robot. And so then it doesn't meet a need. So really sitting in the space, immersing yourself in it, and understand the lived realities of the day-to-day.
On that point, because one of the key things, of course, is if we look at a lot of technology to replace human workforce, what we don't take into account is the fact that a human workforce can do more than just that single task. So the dance robot's a great example. We've seen lots of those sort of demonstrative. But the reality is, if a human's doing that dance group, they're doing half a dozen other things at the same time. They're eyeballing the group. They're checking for incontinence issues. They're doing multiple things. So you need to be thinking of that multifunctional.
Yeah, I'll probably add to that as well. If you've got technology where you assume your business case is going to rely on reducing headcount in aged care, a lot of headcount it's regulated. There's a certain amount of carers that are needed to supervise certain groups of people at a certain point in time. So I think to George's point earlier, it's more about making so that people can do more in their day and that the humans can be more effective and care for more people rather than reducing humans in the loop. I've seen a few technology solutions that go down the angle of we're reducing humans in the loop, and they hit regulatory barriers pretty quickly.
Somebody, yes, of course.
So I've read in aged care. I've been part of many teams bringing technology into care, and just a few things to share is to be aware of firewalls, be aware of updates and how they happen, be aware if it's hard to turn on and use for care staff, it will end up on a shelf. they're things to think of too. And consider the family as part of the care team as well, having ways that they can easily understand and access the technology. Speaking tech, not so much other innovations. Just really basic things like that, because those updates, if they don't happen, people don't get to access some of the innovation that is there to enable engagement. And that's more from an engagement perspective. Thank you.
So I noticed we're moving pretty quickly on time, and I had one more question for the audience. So I'll toggle over to the Slido and just ask the last question so that we can give the panel a little bit more time to speak. So I wanted to start moving us into opportunities and what you think that next wave might be. So where are you seeing technology being used effectively? And while we're going through that, I thought I would turn to the panel and ask, initially I was going to ask you about what opportunities might exist to help improve quality of life, but we've covered that. And that kind of opens us up to the next topic, which is something that I'm finding just phenomenal. The information that's getting out there about cognitive rehabilitation, about dementia reablement, about living a good life with dementia. So how might we reimagine dementia support in terms of reablement and even a new category of enablement tech as opposed to age tech?
Yeah, I can jump in a little quickly on that. So with re-enablement, I originally designed the system, but we've created for my mum. And she, like I mentioned before, I was 28 and she was diagnosed with mixed Alzheimer's and vascular dementia, and she couldn't use her phone anymore, and she wasn't using a tablet, and she wasn't using a laptop. But using an app which I created for her, she was actually able to reply to a message on a specific app that I made for her on the first day that she used it. So there's a sort of example there of enablement. And we are also seeing that even when people can't necessarily act and use maybe the device themselves, it's also helpful to be there in place, because it's programmed, say, like with a music button for the favorite music that the loved one enjoys, and that's can be pressed by anyone ultimately. Like, it doesn't have to be pressed by the person themselves using the device. It's still helpful to have those sort of playlists and enjoyable content there for that person.
Well said, Rick. I'd probably sorry. I might add to that as well, which is I guess to talk about the next wave. It's not going to be dancing robots, so to speak. It's going to be small improvements that make day-to-day tasks easier and remove road bumps, so there's less of those upsetting or challenging moments through the day. It can be as simple as having some sensors in a room and then a screen outside the door that means that the care staff don't have to go in and wake someone up when they're getting good rest. Can be pretty hard to achieve that good rest sometimes, especially with a lot of anxiety and a lot of changes. And so something as simple as I can see a light on the door means that person is asleep. Now is not the right time to go in can make a big difference. Helping someone be at home and feel safer and more independent, definitely to Rick's point as well. So one of the technologies I've seen emerging is around smart doorbells. So when the door rings, giving those prompts, it's someone you know, it's something safe, this is the right time to open the door versus this isn't the right time to open the door, so they can feel more independent even when they're, a carer can't be there all the time. And I think also some of the innovation around technologies can be more about social constructs. So, less about technology ruling the day and saying, oh, this is what you need to do here, this is what you need to do there, and giving them all the reminders. That's the technology that's here now that solutions like Rick's do a great job of. But I think then the next step that we're likely to see is around coordinating social activities or coordinating telehealth. For example, not just having someone round paid for by a home care package to get the gardening done, but organizing for a group of people to go to someone nearby's home and they do the gardening together with a facilitator. So it's that active activity. The level of technology innovation required to get to that point isn't huge, but the difference it will make in people's lives is massive. And I think those small steps are what we're likely to see coming next, rather than, an avalanche of gadgets.
So one of the challenges we face is when we think about people with cognitive decline, we focus on their cognitive decline and neglect the rest of the person. So the reality is physical re-enablement actually provides them with a lot of support and slows down the development of cognitive decline, but also provides them with tools to be able to manage part of it. The other thing is making sure we ensure that the communication models are still in place. So again, we tend to think about someone with cognitive decline doesn't know how to communicate. No, they still have a strong desire to communicate. We just need to probably change the way we do communicate. Whether that means we speak slow or we use more visual cues, but also technology tools which enable that asynchronous communication, because often it's that fast synchronous communication becomes a challenge. So we have tools that enable us to communicate asynchronously, and we use those a lot in industry. I mean, we use Slack and Microsoft Teams and those sort of tools to communicate. We can also use those with people with cognitive decline so that they can keep up with the pace of communication.
Yeah, I think for me, that the hardest thing is to get across the gulf that I've got in my head when I try to talk, and the effort that it takes to do that. It may not seem it from the outside, but certainly inside, the cognitive issues mind-blowing, and it takes so longer for me to, even though it might only be a matter of seconds, it feels like it's hours to be able to get across what I want to say, to be able to know what the next word or the next sentence or the next thing is going to be, because it will just disappear and it might come back a day later. And, oh, that's right, that's the word, that's the point, that's what I wanted to say. But everything's gone by then. So give people the time that if you are in that situation on the other side, that let them and be able to give them the space, give them the time, and you'll get a much better, certainly for me, it would be a little bit less hard for me if someone else starts to finish my sentence, because I might want to say something else.
Some of these words are reaching very close to my heart, so it just takes me a moment to recover here. I think we're going to come to the end of time, and I wanted to maybe ask the panel a bit of a close before we move to a few questions from the audience, because I wanted to make sure that we also heard from the audience here in the room. I think that point that you made about giving people time and acknowledging where people are is probably so important. We have to start there and with empathy, but there may be opportunities to do more, and there may be reasons for hope. So I thought I would ask the panel just to reflect really briefly, what might be one thing that gives you hope in this very, very complex landscape?
I'll start. I think the hope, the last 5-10 years, there's been a bit of a shift. I think this event is a good example of hope. I think the irrespective of innovation or technology, the thing that's going to drive change is awareness and destigmatization of aging, dementia, and dying. And this is part of that. And talking about it and sharing it and working with people of mixed experiences and mixed cognitive abilities is a really great way to get that enthusiasm, and especially work as a point of advocacy for funding bodies, because a lot of the time it just comes down to money.
probably add to that as well. Oh, sorry, George. I think the thing that gives me the most hope is seeing how much investment is going into this space. We're fortunate, I guess, that the demographic bubble that's approaching does dictate a lot of spending will happen in this space, and B, a lot of investment will follow. So there's a lot of complex problems to solve here, but the market is at least swinging in the right direction to provide the resources to solve them. That gives me a lot of hope.
What gives me hope is the fact that we're actually now doing real research in this space. So previously we had a lot of anecdotal solutions, which sort of everyone thought was a good idea, but we actually now have ways of evaluating technologies in a realistic way in a real world environment. So that's great. The other key thing, of course, is the digital maturity of the sector. The fact that they can understand that the data they capture from these various technologies has value beyond just ticking a compliance box or ticking a billing box. It's data that we can use to improve decision making. And then thirdly is the workforce. The workforce is becoming more adept at both using the technology but understanding the benefits and communicating to the developers what they want. Because in the past, like I said, you talked about earlier about developing a solution without understanding the problem. Well, we as clinicians or people involved in care have to kind of become better at explaining what our problem is, and so working on a solution together.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's seeing some of the sort of a little bit of tech skepticism or, AI skepticism creeping back in. So, trying not to believe too much in the hype, but just temper it with real lived experience. It's seeing the value that is placed on co-design and the essential nature of, founding your projects, founding your solutions in genuine co-design. So forming advisory panels, consulting with lived experience experts. And that's what's going to get us to real solutions, not dancing robots. No offense if anyone builds dancing robots, but solutions that work for real people. And often they might not be the most cutting edge tech solutions. They might not be something that, big tech companies think of as R&D, but they're the things that make a meaningful difference in people's day-to-day lives. And that shifting focus towards sort of joy and meaningful connection, like some of the solutions that we're seeing here, and moving away from, just the only use of tech in this space being for sort of monitoring and tracking and protecting people's safety and controlling what they do, but really thinking of people with dementia as active users of technology if we create the right kinds of technologies.
For me, I think that what I want to really get across is this illness I've got is a part of me. It's not all of me. I've got a lot more living to do, and I'm going to do that.
Can I just ask something a bit bizarre? Are there any aged care facilities that provide Wi-Fi for residents, like hotels do, for instance? Yeah, because that would be great. Because I imagine now and moving forward, a lot of residents coming into aged care will want to bring their own devices with them, and that would be a way of keeping them engaged with technology. So, just a thought.
I'll just say, as someone that rolls out technology that uses Wi-Fi into aged care, the vast majority of them do now, which is really fortunate. Some of them have a bit of a archaic thing called a captive portal authentication system. If anyone that's running aged care with those, please switch them off. They're too hard to work with, but most aged care facilities do have quite good, stable Wi-Fi.
What gave me a lot of hope when my mum was diagnosed with dementia, was that we had some absolutely amazing times together, and it really wasn't. It was some information we had, and we had a camper van, and when we went to England, we would take her out for days with that, and it was just like we had so much fun, and so many memories were created from the family with my mum, and I think there's so much hope in all of his stories of that really are there, and we see it all the time with people. And there's so much hope that everyone's here today. I mean, it's like fantastic that everyone's come and to talk about some really important matters at hand, really.
So,
That's excellent. I thought I would actually just pause for a moment and just check if there were any questions from the floor here. Tej, we might pass one of the mics. Is that all right?
Sure.
Thank you. Thanks, Jess.
Hi, my name's Tejwant. Thank you for acknowledging the aged care workers. Thank you. That's a really wonderful thing. Today, what I have heard, sorry, got to put my glasses on. Can't see about that. What I've heard is that we need a solution that connects families, carers, medical professionals. We need a solution that helps us to find the unmet needs of the person living with dementia. We are saying that we need a solution that's not a clinical solution. We need a solution that's a non-pharmacological solution, right? We are saying we need something that makes life of everyday person a little easier. Yeah. What we haven't said is the carers coming from a different culture and looking after the persons living with dementia. What we haven't said is bridging the gap. What we haven't said is changing the perspective of the carer who is looking after the person living with dementia. Right? Talking about everyone who's looking after them. Talking about whether it's the daughter looking after the dad, whether it's the husband looking after his wife. On top of that, what we haven't mentioned is the reliance on restrictive practice, right? What if I told you that I've built a solution for that? Not to identify who has dementia, not to identify that. For those who have mild to medium type of dementia, it probably won't work for them. But those who have medium to severe dementia, in those cases, if there was a solution that would help you understand who this person behind dementia is, something that helps you connect with them, something that helps you to see and get educated on right now what's happening. What could be happening that's causing that problem right now? Something that would then help you make a better connection with him. Whether that's changing your perspective to understand that, yes, I've been a husband to this beautiful wife for the last 45 years. And today, I've got to become her brother. Why? Because her brother is her anchor. Why? Because she's forgotten who I am. And now I have to be the brother. Something that understands the toll it's taking on the carers, the stress, the burnout that they are going through. Something that can work for them. Something that can bridge the gap between the carer. The carer is coming from Asia. The person living with dementia has always lived their life here. They don't understand what's happening. Their language can be completely wrong. They might mean the best, but their language is completely wrong. What if there was something that could teach them, this is how you need to communicate? This person's coming with a Greek background. Something that can tell them words that can help you make that connection. Real-time education. Something, because now you have started making that connection with the person you're caring for, you are now going to see less cases of refusal of care. Less cases of refusal of care means less unneeded hospital admissions, meaning lesser cases of where confusion's going to happen, meaning lesser reliance on restrictive practice. And that solution should be something that gives the staff the support they need, if the staff feels supported in the moment when they need it, doesn't that mean that they'll stay in the facility a little longer? Right? And if that's the case, I've built that solution. And I've built that solution under the guidance of Dr. Kawaljit Singh. Tom, my husband, Dr. Kawaljit Singh, he goes and sees the most difficult behaviors that we mentioned at various facilities in HammondCare. He's been on the floor, working with them, working with the people who are trying to make that care plan for them. And this solution is something that's going to help the aged care facilities today get that the new changes that have come through from the Aged Care Quality Commission, something that has to be person-oriented. It gives you that evidence-based, that you know what is going to work for this person who comes with this background versus this person who comes with a different background. It's ready.
Fantastic points. I agree with you in all ways. This sector would agree with you in all ways, and research would agree with you in all ways, is that the fundamental part of care is understanding the person. And to understand the person, you have to understand their circumstance and their culture and their history and their preferences and their idiosyncratic sense of self. You'll find that, people try their best to do that. And increasing diversity of a care workforce has made that increasingly more difficult. Same too with an increasingly diverse population of people aging and with dementia. Currently, it's around a third of people living with dementia in Australia were born in a non-English speaking nation. And that mismatch is difficult both from a culture and a language perspective to truly understand the person in a non-tokenistic way. And the tokenism is a big thing to acknowledge. It's like, I read their little chart. They used to horse ride and they love the Rolling Stones. That's not enough to fully appreciate and understand the person. I would say also what you describe is on the roadmap of a number of people as a primary priority. And that's where LLMs are going to play a very substantial role. Absolutely. Because they can feed in from inputs from family, from history, that are educated guesses. And a clinical profile and a range of other pieces.
Because it doesn't matter if the person has dementia, rather than saying they're wandering because, they're a problem for us, let's find a way to stop him doing it. Let's change our perspective. Let's give the carer the opportunity to understand what is he looking for. Maybe it needs to be a redirection that...
And just a point on there, when you do that, you're in the business of prevention. And prevention is better than a cure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I've built Amara Dementia Care. It's been built with 70 years of clinical medicine plus tech experience. It's going to get piloted in aged care facilities. I've got one lined up here and then another one starting next year. Then we are bringing the at-home carers app, that the families who are looking after persons with dementia can then do that.
Thanks for that. I'm just mindful of time. We have actually run out of time to get more questions. Thank you.
So the only comment I make there is that obviously a tool that supports workforces is what, as we were discussing, and the reality is people that go into this sector go in caring and wanting to do that. But then they get told you've got to do 7 showers in the first hour of the day. You've got to make sure medication rounds are done. And so, when we measure productivity, that's how I measure productivity in the sector. So we need to rethink how we measure that productivity in the sector as well.
Absolutely. So I think that just shows how complex this space is. But I am really mindful of time and, mindful of the people who've supported us today on the event. So I wanted to take a moment to really just show thanks to our amazing panel. Hopefully you too agree that they are an amazing group. So thank you, Zach, Rick, Denise, Peter, Celia, Tom, George. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Thank you to the audience for your feedback. We weren't able to get through the questions that were in the Slido, but we'll see if we can get some feedback afterwards. I also wanted to extend my thanks to Katya Numbers, who couldn't join us here today, but she was really instrumental in helping me convene the panel and to get some of these amazing speakers here today. Also, Yazaman Yazidi and Yutong Lee from my team, who were working in the background from early today to make sure that things work smoothly through the event. Murray Herbst and Alex Gray at this amazing space of UTS startups. So really thank you for making it work. And, I also need to do a final shout out to the team of Spark Festival, who actually plugged our event in the program. So I think I've given my special thanks to you guys. We couldn't have done this without an audience, and really thanks to everybody who submitted feedback through the event. Genuinely, I hope that this is the start of many conversations. I feel like we couldn't finish the conversation in the room. So when I do a ping back to you, I may ask you if you'd be interested in doing a similar event in the new year. And hopefully we can continue a lot of great conversations to have some amazing impact. I don't know if we're going to have time for any networking after the event, because I think we've kind of maxed out our welcome, and there's some really good folks that need to get home tonight. So good night to everybody, and hopefully we'll get to keep the conversation going. Thanks.